Good morning, everyone, and very much welcome to another Flash Friday. I'm very happy to be speaking to you again today about all the developments in fintech, and hopefully we'll give you an engaging talk to see what's going on in the bigger trends in the financial industry and technology. Today we'll focus a bit more on the payments industry, as we've got a very special guest, Russell Curzon from Nium. Good morning, Russell.
Good morning.
Great to have you on the show, live from the UK, one of the countries that everyone's at least from the continental Europe, looking at in jealousy with regard to how vaccinations are going, and the world seems to be opening up. So you must be in a cheerful mood, and we hope to convey some of that also in our conversation today. Should you have any questions, please type them in the chat or in the remarks. We'll try to see if we can weave them into our conversation going forward. But first of all, let's get to know you a little bit better, Russell. What does Nium do, and where are you heading?
Yeah, great. So I'm glad to be here, and thanks for inviting me along. And yes, everything is looking quite rosy in the UK at the moment, particularly as you can see from behind me, the sun's shining. It's a rare thing in England, but I'm going to make the most of it. So to introduce Nium very quickly, what we are is a financial services platform that allows businesses to unlock new revenue opportunities and improve their cash flow economics globally. What we do is we bring together both the technology and the license capability to allow people to move money around the world at pace and at scale. Are licensed in 12 geographies. That gives us access to something like 100 countries where we can move money physically, and then also we can issue cards. We can take money in, we can send money out, and we can issue cards on a global basis.
Okay, that sounds great. So what I think that there's a lot of talk about this kind of payment capabilities, right? So you've got in Europe, for example, you've got also now with PSD2 a new payment initiation licenses popping up. So you've got much more parties that are actually able to play with the payment rails. What kind of companies or what kind of clients are you mostly focusing on, and how do they then use you?
So we traditionally, we always focused on serving other financial services businesses. So we work with a lot of banks. We work with other fintechs and licensed financial institutes. But more and more nowadays, we're going broader than that as well. So we now work with travel companies. We work with shipping lines. We work with large corporates. You know, if you look at the world nowadays, it's a global marketplace. People are they're not focused just on their home territories. They're buying goods in from overseas. They're selling overseas. And anyone that has that need to move money from one place to another, then we will go and talk to them.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because I do see indeed that let's say the payment service is becoming much more of a sort of integrated building block that much more parties want access to and have at their control. And
Absolutely.
Do you also see that? Is that driving some kind of integration as well? So think about, are you then working also with ERP systems to actually enable connectivity between the payment rails and other administrative processes?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you think back over time, there was the only people that really dealt with payments were banks. But now more and more organizations, they're building payments into just part of their normal workflow. And we're embedding our technology into those sorts of businesses where you might have an app for I don't know. Let's talk about Uber, for example. Uber originally was designed for booking a car to move you from point A to point B, but there's a whole ecosystem that sits behind that, where payments becomes part of that as well. Who would have thought that you could jump in a car and get out the other end and not even think about payments? And what we're doing is we're enabling more and more organizations to make that payment point as pain-free and as easy as possible.
Yeah, I think there's a really, really big need for that. And so where do you see that going from here, right? So I think allowing people to get access to payments is very often also seen as some kind of an enabler that you can build on top of, right? So that you can actually also accumulate more services to it. Would you do that with partnerships, for example, or is it also something that you would see on your own product roadmap to expand the services that you deliver to your customers?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it is about how we can do more, particularly with the focus with cross-border, because that's where the foundations of our business is. But where there's a need for payments and there's a need for money to move from one country to another, then that's where we step in and we want to get into that flow.
Yeah. All right. No, I think that's really it's a really interesting one to see where that's heading. And so if you look into, I found it interesting, for example, this week that Plate got another big funding round in, right? As I think you also work with Visa, that was to acquire Plate some time ago. What's your working relationship with Visa at the moment?
So our relationship with Visa is really, really good. Originally we were part of the Visa FinTech Accelerator. More recently, so last year, Visa became one of our investors, and they've helped us a lot. They've helped us launch our card programs globally. So we launched about 18 months ago with Visa cards in Singapore and Australia. We've now taken that to other markets, so Europe and the UK, and that continues to that footprint continues to expand. But having Visa as an investor, it does our business a world of good to have brands like that are backing us, and then having it as another product in our kit bag has been really helpful as well to attract new customers and to gain additional business.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. So did you encounter Plate as well in your at least the network around Visa already? And did you explore working with them?
Personally, I haven't. Obviously, I know Plate, and they're a brilliant business. And I'm sure with their latest investment round, that will take them to their next step. And I'm sure at some point there will probably be some kind of IPO or someone else might step in and buy them as well. But you can see the journey that they're upon and that they are on, and they're a massively impressive business. They've got great technology. Potentially, I think there might be some room for us to work together in the future, but I'm not sure whether we are close to that yet.
Yeah, I can imagine. But it's quite interesting to see, right? Also, where the sort of the game of actually being able to make the payments. You see that there's a lot of interest shifting towards being able to access payments and having the data at your disposal to build further on top of. Where do you think that's going to head from here? Do you see that that's interesting perspective also from your business?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that data is king. Having insight. And knowing what's happening, whether it's internally or with customers or whatever it is, the access that you need and being able to analyze data correctly and spot trends and spot opportunities, protect yourself, all of those sorts of things. Without access to that intricate level of knowledge that you gain from being able to look at the data, then you're nowhere. And everything moves so quickly nowadays that you need to be on point all the time.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think it's definitely it's pretty tough to keep an eye out for everything, because there's just so much objects are moving at the same time, so it's hard to identify where everything's heading. But it's also nice that at least there's something going on that you can have an impact on, right? So that's the nice part of this, I think, because everything is in flux.
Yes. Yeah.
And so where do you see things heading from Nium going forward, right? So what if you would talk about your ambition, is that a further geographical spread, or are there specific types of customers that you're keen on bringing on board as well? What's coming up?
A good question. And probably all of the above would be the answer. There's when we look at our business, we're obviously in the market. We want to continue growing. We want to get to a stage where we are more widely known than we are today, and become that go-to place when people want to do anything around cross borders or payments. And for us, it probably falls into three key areas. Certainly geographic expansion. So, we started off 6 years ago very much as an Asia-focused business. I joined the business a little bit over 3 years ago as we moved into Europe and the US. And since then, our expansion has continued. So when I first joined, we had nothing in Latin America. We're now reasonably well established in Latin America. And more recently, you may have seen that we launched routes into the African continent and the Middle East. So, we'll continue expanding that. So certainly, point one is about geographic expansion. The more countries we're in, then it gives us access to serving more customers. And that's the second point in terms of growth. Is it's all about, how we can attract more customers to the Nium brand, whether that's about making cross-border payments, whether we're going to be in the market to allow them to receive money in different countries, or whether we're issuing cards on their behalf. So, the three products there. And then that brings me into the third area. So, after geographic expansion, adding new customers, it's then about, how we can continue to build out our product set as well. So today, we essentially we have this technology, this banking as a service technology that allows you to send money, to receive money, and allows you to issue cards as well. What more can we do there? So at the moment, we process cards and we issue cards, but we don't acquire them. So being able to be a card acquiring engine as well, that would be an interesting departure. And then looking at our infrastructure, how we can break our infrastructure down and just provide bits of a solution where it's needed, or bring all of those bits and pieces together to allow people to build something that looks like a bank.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Also, just to pick on your perspective there with your Asian roots that you mentioned. I think from at least from a European perspective, we always looked at sometimes with some jealousy at how payments are, especially from a consumer end, really integrated in the Asian market. I can imagine that you also see a different perspective there from B2B payments that sparks, gives you a different edge than, let's say, European or US-born payment companies that are in a similar space. Do you get an advantage from that, from actually having a certain perspective from the Asian market?
I think we probably do. It was. I'm a European, so I'm based just outside of London, and when I first joined Nium, it was new to me to get exposure to how an Asian business works and operates. And what I see is there's a different level of energy. And again, it was when you look at the payment space in Asia, it's quite diverse and quite advanced. They in a lot of Asian countries, their banking infrastructure and the way that payments work is probably 2 or 3 years ahead of where we are even in Europe. And Europe is a good place. And then the US is probably another 3 or 4 years behind that. But I think that everyone is gradually catching up. And we look at Asia and we look at some of the stuff that's going on there, and we've done a lot of that in Europe. And the US will be getting there whenever the US gets there. Who knows? But they will get there as well.
Well, they seem to be making some progress under Biden to actually to change some things. So let's see where that's heading. It's definitely interesting to see that. At the same time, of course, we have plenty to learn from the US as well, but that's more on the capital markets level, for example. So you see that also within financial services, there's quite some different speeds at different levels.
I agree.
But so I think that's really interesting. And so, do you also look at that? For example, do you, for example, enable your customers also to actually go into the retail payment experience? So, let's say, for example, another Dutch bank announced this week that they will be adding Google Pay to their options. Is that something that you're concerned with as well for your customers? These kind of end-to-end payment solutions.
I mean, certainly on the card side of the business, then that needs to be as frictionless as possible. So having Google Pay and Apple Pay as part of that offering, using the technology that comes along with open banking again, that is an absolute requirement. On the send side, so where we're doing payouts or doing collections on behalf of others, we want to get there. We're probably not quite there yet, but it's definitely when I look at our roadmap and our product development, you can see the bits and pieces that are coming together that will allow us to get to that point, even on the B2B side as well.
Yeah, I can imagine that it will in the. I think you will in the end get some bit more of a convergence between B2B and B2C at some point. I believe, but and so how do you let's say one of the hot topics, of course, these days is everything going on in crypto, very much on the asset side, right? So parties want to invest it, people putting it on their balance sheet because they think it's a good asset to have, and also benefit from the value increase. At the same time, it's also still being explored as a payment rails option through central bank digital currencies, for example, but also, of course, with solutions like that actually focus on remittances, for example. Is it something that you're either personally or with Nium are exploring or keeping an eye on these developments?
I think when it comes to crypto, for us, it's sort of watch this space. It's certainly it's the way that the market appears to be going, and at some point I think we will do some experimentation with it, but at the moment we don't. But there's lots of good stuff that's going on, but there's also an amount of inherent risk that comes along with crypto as well. We as a business are trying to understand where that risk sits, and weighing that against the benefits that it would bring. And at some point, we'll make a decision about whether we can go down that route or whether we have to stick with more traditional routes. The other challenge, of course, is always around banks. And a business like ours, we spend a lot of our life trying to attract new customers and build new territories, as I mentioned earlier. But we can't do that without having good and well-protected bank relationships. And whenever you're looking at something like crypto, you always have to have the eye on, well, if you're working with ABC Bank, wherever they might be, you need to make sure that your banks are on board with it as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's definitely really sensitive in this space. You see that a lot of regulators, and especially through them, sort of with delegated supervision, also a lot of banks are just not comfortable with crypto dealings. There's, of course, more on the asset side. While I think on the, let's say, blockchain as rails kind of solution, I think there's quite some interesting experimentation. But I think indeed it's relatively early still. So just keeping an eye out is probably, and in any case, probably also your connection with Visa will help you out, since they also recently experimented with actually a settlement of a payment on a blockchain, Ethereum blockchain.
Yeah.
So they're also taking some early steps to just figure out what it's going to mean. And but it's interesting to keep an eye out for it. It will become some shape of mainstream. The question is where and how exactly, because that's still to be determined.
Yeah, I agree.
And so basically, one of the things that you mentioned was the sort of the frictionless side of payments, right? I think that's everyone's sort of holy grail these days. Is everything needs to be frictionless, instant, frictionless, and no hassle at all. You rather not even think about it. But of course, that's going to be a bit too far. But at the same time, you see that there's also quite some regulatory pressure on that causes friction. Think, for example, in Europe about anti-money laundering directive being implemented. How do you deal with these kind of requirements around your payments, and do you have to work on that a lot and provide solutions for that as well for your customers?
Yes. I mean, as a business, we have always been compliance led. It is probably, it makes up between technology and compliance, that probably makes up the majority of the people that we employ across the business. So, and we have, wherever we are active, and we're active in, I think we've got offices in 12 countries now. There's always a compliance head in each country. And their job is to, number one is understand the regulator, Number two, work with the regulator, and then also make sure that our business is protected as well. And that comes down to the usual sort of gatekeeping exercises to make sure that we're not letting the bad people in, and that we're monitoring everything that we do so that we don't get caught out later as well.
Yeah, no, true. So I think it's one of the really important things, and that's also why, let's say, innovation in the financial industry has a different dynamic than in most other industries, because of this stringent regulations and this sort of gatekeeper perspective that all financial services companies have to deal with. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, you will, if you haven't got the right approach to the regulatory side, then you're not going to be around. You're going to get shut down pretty quickly and face some pretty steep penalties as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's indeed what we see, is that somehow the big penalties are driving different behavior in the markets, which I think it was really necessary. At the same time, it also sometimes worries me that that seems to also be in the way of a normal conversation on how to actually tackle this challenge between supervisors, policymakers, and the market altogether. As the conversation also hardens when you basically start issuing fines.
Yes. Yeah.
And so how do you, so from that perspective, do you also see that there's, if we focus a bit on Europe, right? So do you see how that there's a big change coming now, or do you expect something to happen because of Brexit, for example, that how the UK is looking at this? Because I know that they're really, generally they're really smart in understanding what the impact of financial services could be. And therefore they really try to create a leading platform almost for financial services innovation, right? So I think recently the Khalifa review gave a new input on the discussion on how to nurture fintech in the UK. In Europe, I think that's much more, you see that actually administrations are much less inclined to do something favorable for fintech, except for some, let's say, a couple of countries like Luxembourg or Lithuania, which are really prone to do something like that, but many other countries are still sort of pushing a bit back on the financial industry. What are your expectations at that level?
Yeah, so I read the Khalifa review last week, and actually I used to work for Ron when I was at WellPay when he was the executive chairman there. So I know him well and have huge respect for Ron as well. He's a brilliant leader and really knowledgeable about the whole payment space. And it's encouraging that when you see a report like that, and this is looking at it, I guess specifically from a Brit's perspective. So me being based in the UK and working from here, about the whole payment infrastructure and the ecosystem, the fintech world and government trying to come together to make this or to continue to make this an attractive place to do business from. You mentioned Lithuania, so we have an EMI issued from the FCA. We also have one issued from Bank of Lithuania as well. So we have two EMIs, Europe and UK, because that's a requirement now. And it's been interesting to work with. When I look at the regulator in Lithuania, they've been really, really helpful for us, and they helped us get into the European marketplace. And then again, working with the FCA, they've been quite helpful with us in gaining our UK license as well. But I think that the focus in the UK around the fintech space, about making sure that we can continue to attract the right sort of talent, that we continue to be global thought leaders on this is how regulation can look and can be shaped. It can only be good for the UK market and actually for the wider fintech market as well. And I think the collaboration between the UK and the rest of Europe, certainly in the financial space, will continue. Obviously, there's a bit of a barrier because of Brexit. It sort of is what it is. We're going to have to all learn how we're going to live with it. But that doesn't mean that we can't continue to collaborate and can't continue to work together to make the entire fintech space a better place for all.
No, I fully agree, and I think that's definitely. I think, let's say, from a market perspective, there's no reason not to collaborate between the UK and the rest of Europe.
Absolutely.
I still call it also the rest of Europe. It's not Europe versus the UK. It's still one Europe, I would say.
I agree with that as well. Yeah.
So it's just a legal boundary that's been put up, which is a bit of a hassle. But at the same time, I think there's still a large inclination to collaborate, and I think I fully agree as well that I think the UK has always taken a leading role in the fintech space, and I wouldn't see that changing overnight as well. The gravity, the mass that has been accumulated already on fintech with regard to venture capital, talent, and especially also facilitating regulator and policymakers, makes it a really compelling story still. And I know it's good that the rest of Europe is trying to catch up there, but hopefully in collaboration increasingly. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'm curious how that'll go out. So I think also there in Europe, we still have a lot of work to do to cut down between boundaries between countries. Is that also something that's from your end a challenge to actually be able to actually deal with all the jurisdictions that you can find? I mean, globally, there's just a lot of different jurisdictions that you have to cope with. You already mentioned the importance of compliance and the way that you focus on that country by country. But is that still? Do you also see that as a hurdle? Or is it also more like an asset to you because you are actually able to manage all these jurisdictions?
Again, that's a really good question, and I guess it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? That actually, it's a great asset to Nium as a business that we are already in all these different territories, because we've put in the groundwork over the last 6 years. A huge amount of effort has gone into making sure that we are properly licensed in the countries that we are licensed in, and working with the regulators. A lot of these licenses it's a big battle to get yourself regulated, and then it's a continual battle to make sure that we continue to be regulated and that we're keeping our regulators on our side. So there's a huge amount of work that goes into that across our business to maintain that regulatory landscape that we already have established. And then every time we're going into a new country, we face that battle again. It takes a lot of time, a lot of people that are far cleverer than I am, working with the regulators to understand the regulatory regime and make sure that we can comply with that. But it's a good route. It's a good route to growth for us. If as we're expanding, we want to get licenses. We want to get licenses in Latin America. We want to get licenses in the Middle East. We want to get licenses in various African countries as well. And we will get there, but it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes quite a lot of investment as well. Normally when you're going into a new country, once you've got the regulatory approval signed off, you also have to put up a fair amount of capital in that market as well to make sure that you can maintain that as well. So all those things together, it makes it a big task for us. But it's certainly one of the ways that we grow our business is by going into these new territories and making sure that we're complying with the regulatory regime, as well as maintaining our regulatory regime in the countries where we already are. Yeah, I think that's really it's really nice to. I think from that perspective, it's definitely also an asset, right? So indeed, it's to just like before you get there, it's going to be quite a hassle. But once you have it, you've got an advantage compared to parties that don't have that license. Absolutely. Right? Yeah. It puts us more in control.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really nice one. And so once you've got it done, you could actually focus on your customer side much more on trying to facilitate their needs. So I think we've got just 1 minute left, Russell. So I think it's really nice to get your perspective like this. Is there anything else you would want to add or give a perspective on? What do you think we should be looking out for from here on?
I think that what we're going to continue to see in the payment space in particular is this demand for people wanting things quicker, and that's the way that we've built our platform. Is everything that we do is how close can we get to real time? Everyone wants that payment to happen now, and they want it as seamless and as pain-free as possible. And that's where we're heading, and that continues to keep us focused. That's what keeps us busy and keeps us interested.
Yeah, no, I think that's I fully agree. I think at the time, everyone just wants everything instantaneously. So that's definitely a nice challenge to do that based on the ancient payment rails that runs with batches on a regular set times. There's a lot of technicalities to come into that to actually fix it. So great that you focus on that and that you're helping your customers with that. So I would really like to thank you, Russell, for sharing your insights today.
Don, it's been great talking to you this morning.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I hope everyone who listened in got a little bit smarter about Nium and developments in the payment industry. I hope you really enjoyed. Thanks for joining us today, and I'm really much looking forward to talking to you again next week. Thanks again, Russell and Nium. It was a lot of fun, and talk to you all again next week. Have a great weekend.
Goodbye.